Welcome to the Currency of Grief, the podcast where we confront two of society's most taboo topics, death and money. My name is Justin Weidenfeld, and I'm here to serve as your grief financial officer, guiding you through the complex and emotional journey of what happens when money and mortality collide. Whether you're navigating the aftermath of losing a loved one, looking for practical advice on handling pre- and post-death planning, or simply just wanting to start those hard conversations about legacy while you still can, this space is for you. Together, we'll hear real-life stories from real-life people who have navigated the intersection of grief and money and come out the other side. Our guests will share their stories, practical insights, valuable advice, and moments of clarity so that none of you have to navigate this alone. I'm grateful you've decided to join us on this journey. Now let's dive in. So without further ado, let's meet our guests for today's podcast. I am humbled and honored to be in the virtual studio with Mike Lodato. Michael is a Brooklyn-based writer and the owner of liquorpermit.com. Yes, we'll get into that story in a bit. In 2022, Mike's mother was diagnosed with melanoma, entered hospice late that November, and passed away, unfortunately, just before Christmas. Upon her passing, Michael and his sister stepped in as co-executors, which wasn't easy to navigate. And what followed was a crash course in death certificates, DMV bureaucracy, the hardest financial decisions of his life, what to do with the business, relationships, and the life his mom left behind. Michael, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of The Currency of Grief.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about my experience.
Of course. And we met through a mutual friend who I met at the Experience Camp's Adult Grief Retreat. Plug for the Experience Camp's Adult Grief Retreat for those adults out there who want to be with other people who have experienced what unfortunately you and I have experienced. But when our friend Sam, asked you to, if you wanted to come on the podcast, and when we had our conversation, what made you want to come on the podcast today and share your story?
Yeah, our mutual friend Sam is my neighbor, and we had run into each other picking up mail and things like that, and eventually decided to get to know each other over a beer. And I ended up sharing that Sam had lost his father at a very young age, and I lost my mother when I was about 30. And I told him this story about how difficult it was to be executor of my mother's will, and then also just be someone who had lost someone important to them on the younger side, and just realizing that there's not a lot of support, not a lot of resources, and not a lot of people who understand what that experience is like. So I'm always excited to talk to people who have had this experience and share, some of what I learned, because I've learned a lot.
Yeah, and I'm excited to dive into all of that, the unfortunate learnings of losing someone close to you and someone that you love. But as you know, I think you've listened to a couple of episodes. Here on the Currency of Grief, we don't hold back, we dive right in. So, Michael, tell us about your mom and your grief story.
Sure. My mother, my mother and I were very close friends. In addition to having a great mother-son relationship, and I had for many years helped her with her businesses. She was sort of a serial entrepreneur. She owned a dress shop at one point, and later became a paralegal, helping people get liquor permits, which I'll talk to you more about. But she was surprised to find that she had contracted melanoma in early 2022, and it progressed rapidly. And she ended up entering hospice care in November of that year and passed away around Christmas. And so, our family came together to care for her during that time. It required a lot of work to just manage her health. But true to form, she was working until on her deathbed until her final days. And I ended up learning the ropes of her business just out of necessity. And after she did pass away, so I wanted to do right by her clients, and it fell to me to handle the logistics afterwards. That involved, figuring out what happens to her car, what happens to these accounts, her website, and also selling her house, which my sister and I worked on together.
Hmm. Wow, it sounds like the. I mean, it just happened so fast, which is
Yes, it
really.
was less than a year.
Uh, and who was there? Who gave you support, either like during that time once she got the diagnosis, and then after during those emotions of grief?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my sister was huge. I mean, we became a real team throughout this experience. My parents were divorced, but my father stepped up to help during hospice care, which was invaluable. There's just so much
Yeah.
logistically necessary to helping somebody through that experience. Um, and so I'm grateful he was there to help us with that. After my mother's passing, my mother had a long career as a paralegal and had a lot of close friendships with lawyers in our
Mhm.
community. And actually, a lawyer, his name is Dan McCabe, offered to handle the probate process for us, which I deeply appreciated. Uh, of course, there were a lot of tasks that fell to me on the logistical side. But just having him as a resource was huge. He had actually been the one to hire my mother. He was probably 26 years old, right out of law school, when
That's
she got her first job as a secretary at a law firm in Stamford, Connecticut. And so
wow.
they had just maintained a friendship over the years. And yeah, he was a huge help, and he continues to be a friend to me.
That's really special, and it's cool that you're able to continue to have relationships with the people that your mom knew, and kind of to utilize your those resources when you need them. And speaking of relationships, it seems like you're a very friendly guy. Met Sam in the as a neighbor, and so I'm sure you had a lot of friends. And so, how did your friends relate to your experience? And do you have any stories around your friends showing up to you for
Yeah,
you?
this is a hard thing because even now, I know very few people who've experienced something like this. And
Mm.
being 30 years old and losing a parent is unusual. It's normally something that's happening later in life, at a different stage of life. And so I found that it was just hard to share my story and find people who could relate and understand. That said, my friends were like there for me in a big way,
Hmm.
and I ended up moving out of. I live in New York City, and I moved back to Connecticut. It was kind of just it was returning to my childhood in some ways, just living with my mother again while I was caring for her instead of her caring for me.
Right.
And when I got back to the city, I mean, it was important to me to um, get back to life, and yeah, I appreciate that my friends were, um, you know, willing to take me out for a beer, go to the movies, and just kind of take my mind off things in some ways. I definitely went through periods of time where I retreated from social life.
Hmm.
It's funny when you go through this experience. I mean, at least for me, there was part of me that was like, social life is an escape. Let's go
Yeah.
out, let's think about something else. But then it's also raw and vulnerable, and so I think that there's a push and pull there. Um, but even at times when I was feeling low and kind of hermiting away, I had friends who knew what I needed. I had a friend, Andy, who I remember, I'll never forget this. I remember specifically saying, I don't want to hang out. I don't want to talk. I just kind of need to be in my own space right now. But Andy ended up coming over and saying, hey, listen, let me just drop something off for you. And they had made me some bruschetta. And I said, thank you. And I just remember sitting late at night at my desk eating some bruschetta. And I was like, damn, I've needed this, And
Yeah.
so even when friends might not have had the same experience, um, they can be there for you in these sorts of ways where people who are close to you know what you need before you do. So I'm
Yeah.
grateful
Or
to
you
my
don't
friends.
even,
Yeah.
and the emotions are so overwhelming that you don't even know what you may need. And
Yes.
so maybe you just needed the bruschetta to get you through the night, or just a snack or something like
Exactly.
that. Or you needed the socialization, even though, the thing for me that was always challenging is my dad was always on my mind. And so I would go out with my friends and, get beers and stuff like that because I was still in college. And, um, I was thinking about my dad, and my friends were like, "Oh, I'm so mad that this like the line to get into the bar was so long," and it just like didn't add up. It's like this
Yes.
problem is so minimal when like I just got off the phone with the attorney and we're trying to find my dad's death certificate. So like, I get it. I
Yes.
get the hermiting.
And you end up carrying that. I mean, there's so much. It's hard to even explain to somebody what the details of the experience involve, aside
Yeah,
from the emotional side, where things are reminding you of this person you lost that are surprising. You don't expect to be feeling this wave of emotions, and then all of a sudden you are.
yeah,
And it's somebody making a comment about an upcoming wedding or something like that, and I just think, oh, my mother won't be here for that, And
mm,
so those are things that are hard to communicate to people because they're surprising even to you. But yeah, the
right.
logistical side, I mean, yes, like I can remember many times getting a beer with a friend and being like, you have no idea. I just spent like 3 hours on the phone with Toyota trying to figure out how to take possession of my mother's car. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just
Ho-
unbelievable bureaucratic
Hold that,
nonsense.
hold that story because we
Oh,
will
sure.
get to the Toyota story. But from the emotional side, how did you process and what felt right for you? Is there an outlet that maybe some of our listeners could that have experienced loss could like, use that you maybe like felt really good for you?
Well, I signed up for therapy right away, kind of thinking I think I'll need this. But what's funny about grief is it's an unpredictable kind of roller coaster experience, and I
Hmm.
felt basically okay in the immediate following months. But I knew that it would be good to have someone taking notes, listening to me, and there for me when I was ready to talk. And that was a good decision, I think. Like I really benefited from therapy and stuck with it a long term, where I started to see more benefits over time as your therapist gets to know you.
Yeah.
I did sign up for uh, a group called the Dinner Party, which I don't think exists anymore, actually. But I do
Mm.
recommend grief groups in general. It's not something that I thought I myself would gravitate towards, but I decided to do it. It was recommended to me by one of the social workers who was working with us during hospice.
Hmm.
And the group was meant for people who lost a parent in their 20s or 30s. And we would get together and just sort of talk. And
Wow.
it's something that I probably wouldn't have naturally done, but I took the recommendation because I figured, again, I might not know what I need, and just having it there is
Yeah.
uh, comforting, and it was great. So although that organization I think is no longer operational, I think that there's a need for groups like that, and I would encourage people to seek out kind of camaraderie with folks who've gone through this.
Yeah, I really love that advice because there may be people who are further along in their grief journey or not as far, but where that you can, if they're newer, just like you're doing here, you can sort of mentor and give advice, and if they're further along, they can maybe give you advice. And also, it's just a community of people who get it. For me, that group was experience camps, and I have heard of the Dinner Party, and I do think they unfortunately are out of business
Yeah.
or no longer exist. But um, I mean, it's so nice to, just like your friend Andy who brought over the bruschetta, it's so nice to have people who may say something or may do something that you don't even know you needed, but you did need in that moment.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. Having a support system or a community in place is good. You never know what you're
100%.
going to need.
And speaking of the emotions, talk to us about the process of, well, I want to know how old your sister is in comparison to you, and then talk to us about the process of writing and giving your mom's eulogy, because I think that was a
Oh, sure.
profound moment in, in your immediate grief.
Yes. Yeah, it's been something I continue to process. But when my mother passed away, it was during a time in my sister's life where she was raising two kids as a single mother in the same household as my mother. And my mother
Yeah.
was really contributing. It was a situation where the grandmother played a significant role in just caring for these kids. These kids were young at the time. Now they're 11 and 6. So I guess at the time they must have been like 3 and 8. Um, but right. So, and my sister's a little younger than me. I'm 34. She's 32. And yeah, I mean, I've been a writer for a long time, and I was asked to write my mother's obituary and also a eulogy. And um, that was an interesting experience to talk about somebody that I was so close to, and
Hmm.
but in a way that's like, what is going to be the record of this person's existence? Like, what should she be remembered for? And what do people think of when they think of her? And so, I actually thought it would be a tall order, but I sat down and wrote a draft of the eulogy relatively quickly and was really proud of what I wrote.
Yeah.
I wanted to include that my mother lived like a thrilling life. She got to do lots of things that people only dream of. She ran
Mm.
a bridal shop called the Bridal Suite. And it was at a time when there was a lot of like kind of TV about the subject too. And so she put in some theatrics, like you'd offer champagne to the bridesmaids and just kind of make the
That's
selection of the dress more of a performance or an event. And
yeah.
um, you know, it was a cool thing to watch her rise to the occasion and do so well. Um, and you know, so she's someone who got to own her own business and meet all sorts of interesting, different people. I ended up including in the eulogy actually that she had this bridal shop on a storefront in Stamford, and there was this kid who would come by asking for money basically every day. And what I wanted to commemorate about my mother is how she approached people who were in need like this. I mean, what she basically did was eventually invited him in and said, "Look, I will pay you to stuff envelopes. We got to send out some mailers, and this is what I want you to do." She ended up getting him a bike, calling a school to see if she could get him into the school. And she just
Wow.
went above and beyond for this person that she didn't need to. And
Yeah.
um, not only did she like have great success in her career, but she was always looking out for other people and looking for ways to help that went beyond her obligations. And so I included that. And I was grateful to have so many of my friends there. I met many people at my mother's funeral that I didn't personally know, and it just was really heartening, but also kind of astonishing how much impact that she had. Um, and that separately was another wave of emotions. Just wow, I know my mother in this way, and so many other people know her in another way. It's
Yeah.
really quite nice to learn.
I think it is, and especially when people share obviously positive stories. Um, I think sometimes in the fog of grief, and I don't know how it happened with you, so feel free to, describe it. But with my dad, we had his funeral 5 days after his death, and it was quite sudden. And so I wasn't really ready to hear those stories. And then call it a year later, I kind of lifted my head up and I wanted to hear those stories. I was like, oh wow, my dad hasn't been here for a full year. Now I want to get all the memories, all the stories back. And so was that kind of similar or different for you?
Yes, I mean, I definitely felt that way. We also had my mother's funeral right after her passing. It ended up being right before Christmas. I think it was the 23rd, and I was just dealing with so much. Plus,
Mm,
Christmas is also emotionally charged.
yeah.
That yeah, I wasn't like ready to sit down and hear these types of stories. I was just kind of I just thought it was just remarkable how many people showed up and wanted to share.
Yeah.
And even now, I do kind of. I've met people who knew my mother in high school or something, and I have an appetite for sitting with them and listening.
Of course.
And it's yes, I totally relate to what you're saying. Yeah, it takes time to be ready for that.
Makes sense. And I really appreciate what you shared about the eulogy and the fact that because you knew her so well and you saw her live life, that you were able to include these real life stories about how she lived life and the type of person that she was and how she cared for other people in the eulogy. So that's really special and a really nice sort of, you know, verbal final goodbye in that moment.
Yes. Yes, and she was adventurous, and so I was excited to include all the different things that she had tried in life.
Yeah, that's special. As we navigate and transition to the financial and logistical side, talk to us about what role you took on and really when it started. And so, like, what role did you take on within your family? And then, when did that start, given the diagnosis and the timeline?
Yeah, we didn't really think it through well. It's just something that we hadn't anticipated. And I do remember sitting with our lawyer friend Dan, drafting a will with my mother, but we we didn't think through the details um, too much. My sister and I were appointed co-executors. That was probably not the right decision, but that's just sort of what happened. And because my sister had two kids and was dealing with a lot, and she was living in my mother's house at the time, so pitched in terms of packing things up, and there was just a lot to do in terms of just managing the household.
Yeah.
So I took on the more paperwork side, figuring out, okay, what are we going to do with the car? What are we going to do with this or that account? And yeah, I mean, it started right away. There was all sorts of things to do right away. Contacting the life insurance, figuring out this or that. It ended up being like a part-time job. It's like it was
Yeah,
part of every day for a while.
it is. So, talk to us before we dive into those initial action steps. Why do you think being co-executors with first off, taking a step back, did your mom have a will before, and did you write it once you got the diagnosis?
It was after the diagnosis that we had started to figure this out.
Wow.
So she had her, yeah. So um, the co-executor thing, everybody's situation is different. So,
Yeah.
but in my particular case, my sister and I were totally aligned on what we wanted to do in terms of the house and everything like that. But having a point person, which I sort of was de facto, would have been better because the bank, the DMV, they expect both co-executors to show up. So my sister's managing
Right.
this household with these kids, and they're asking me, do you have the authority to make this decision? And I'm like, my sister and I are totally aligned. There's no animosity. I just want to get this paperwork done, but they need you
Right.
both to be present. And so it might have been cleaner to have one executor, but that's something I didn't even realize would be an issue. I remember being at the DMV being like, can we just call my sister? Like,
Right.
it's not, it just seems like a big ask to have us both in person for every single thing. So that was the challenge that we ran into there.
Of course. And with a 3 and 8-year-old at the time,
Yeah.
that's not easy to leave. And I'm just imagining her with like a 3-year-old trying to run away and an 8-year-old, like, on a cellular device or something like that, in the middle of the DMV being like, why are we here? Like, I don't want to be here.
Yes.
So
Well, that's
I feel
exactly what
like,
happened. So.
yeah, I'm sure. Um, so what were the immediate action steps you had to take on?
Well, we had to. I remember the funeral director asking me about the death certificate. He's like, "How many do you want?" I was like, "I don't know. How many do we need?" He's like, "Well, you don't want too many because there could be an identity theft issue." I was like, I don't even know. This is my first experience doing this. I have no idea. What do you recommend? I have no idea. So I don't know what we ended up doing. We got, I don't know, half a dozen of them. Um, but that ends up being really important to establish what happens to these accounts. Um, I'll tell a quick story about the DMV just because it involves this death certificate situation. But for whatever reason, I had brought the wrong form, and I was trying to, transfer ownership of my mother's car, wait in line. The DM. It was hours upon hours sitting there. Finally, you get up to the kiosk and you're talking to the lady, and she's running her hands over the form, and she's like, there's no raised seal. I can't accept this. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I just waited all day. Raised seal. It's 2023. It seems archaic that such a thing would even be required.
Yeah.
But it was. They turned us away, and we had to come all the way back. So like that was something I didn't even really realize was important. You got to get these forms with the raised seal, and there were multiple reasons to. I still have a few of them just in case like something were to come up. But I didn't even know such a thing exists.
Yeah, it seems like every institution has a different a different process. So like there may be a raised seal at the DMV. There may be, you could do a digital death certificate, like a PDF copy at AT&T, or the bank asks for X, Y, and Z. So that it's just really frustrating to like they don't publish what is actually needed. And like you said, you talked to the funeral director, and maybe they told you, maybe they didn't say that, oh, you need 4 raised seal death certificates for the DMV and the car companies, and 14 non-raised seal. Like there's no advice. That's why part of the reason I started the podcast.
Yes, I mean this information is just like unavailable. So like if I had somebody who had gone through this, I would have asked them tons of questions. I people make suggestions, but I basically was shooting from the hip.
Right.
So
it's basically you try something, you fail, you get turned away, whatever it may be, and then you try again, and you're like, not only are you grieving someone's loss, someone very close to you, but you're also going through this process that just absolutely sucks.
Yes, and actually I remember joking with my sister about the raised seal because like you're carrying all of this emotional energy, and then I can't remember where we were, there's some probate office, and they're pressing it, and it's like there's this like catharsis, like this energy,
right?
It's actually I kind of like it in a way, like that we have that component to it. It just lets out some of that energy.
I wish I was the one to press the seal. Just really
in there. right. It's so physical.
Right, exactly. And what ended up happening to the car?
Yeah, the car was a big problem. We were trying to transfer ownership of the car, and there needed to be car payments made. And, we had the money to make the payments, but for whatever reason, it was difficult to do it without going through the proper channels. And, you call and they're like, well, we got to transfer you to this department or that department. And, it is remarkable. Like, death is part of life. It is inevitable. And you talk to these organizations and they act like surprised that needs to be some process for transferring the ownership of a car that somebody, the owner has passed away. And I didn't do it fast enough or didn't do it right. I don't know what the situation was, but my mother's car ended up getting repossessed right out of the driveway. And I had to send my poor sister to this repo lot to get the car back and make the payment. And I was so upset with them because I told them, like, don't repossess this car. Like, we are just dealing with this process. We'll be done soon. I'm trying to be as forthright and transparent as possible, but it's just not a coordinated effort, and it's not a process that was clear to me, and maybe not clear to the customer service reps. I don't want to throw them under the bus, but there's just not a lot of clarity for what you're supposed to do in situations like this. I mean, we ended up, figuring it out and selling the car. But yeah, that was a journey in and of itself. I don't actually have a car ever since moving to New York, so just the whole thing had become foreign to me by then.
Yeah. On top of it, you also live in a place where having a car and going through that process isn't part of the daily norm, unless you there are people who have cars in New York City, and there are many people who don't.
Yes, I did for a little bit, but then it ends up being so difficult to park that it's a part of my life I left behind. And then now, after my mother's passing, I had to figure all that stuff out again.
Yeah. And I think it's you mentioned clarity. I think it's also communication. I think it's also empathy. It's like, hey, work with me on this. Like, tell me exactly what you need. And, maybe there are bad eggs and bad apples out there who hear about a death and say, hey, this car is mine, like blah, 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 blah. Or like, hey, I am this person, and I'm going to try to take ownership of this car. But from the grief world or the griever standpoint, it really just sucks that the situation and got like, the customer service reps are just like, you have to do this and hang up the phone, and
Yeah.
there's no clarity, there's no working with you. It's like, hey, listen, there's a mailer that goes out and says like, you have 30 days to represent, like, and you don't live. I assumed you didn't live with your
Yes,
mom,
that was a big
or
issue.
maybe you did, but like the mail, moving places, selling homes, like it's really challenging.
Yeah, that was a big deal. Like getting a notice in the mail about, oh, this payment. Well, I'm only checking the mail once every couple of weeks because I'm commuting up from New York to go and look
Right.
at the mailbox of my mother's old house, and it's you know, yeah, it's just very unclear what you're supposed to do. And some people were nice, some people were dismissive, but most often what I encountered is people just weren't really sure what to tell me, and so
Yeah.
that was annoying and just frustrating.
People die every day. I feel like this should be a process that you're trained on. But anyway, that
Yeah,
aside,
I don't know. Yeah.
what happened with liquorpermit.com? Talk about your mom's businesses, and what decisions you have to make.
Yeah, so my mother was a liquor permit consultant. Um, she'd always been, she started out as a secretary at a law firm, became a paralegal, and later in life became a liquor permit consultant, helping bars and restaurants and package stores, liquor, that's our term for liquor stores in Connecticut, get permitted. And
Mhm.
just navigating the process, zoning, and all of the different documentation you need to send to the state to get it done efficiently and on time. And she was just very knowledgeable. But with any consultancy, all of that kind of expertise lives in her head, and in
Right.
is embedded in the relationships and the network that she had.
Yeah.
So when she passed away, I wanted to do right by her clients and make sure that we completed some of the applications that were already in motion. I could not convince her to stop working. I mean, she just wanted to keep working, and
Wow.
just found a lot of fulfillment in that. And I was proud to complete those applications, hand them off to other consultants that I knew when necessary. But somehow she had come into ownership of liquorpermit.com, which is a sought after domain and a useful domain. And I just initially was considering what would be the smartest thing to do with it. We could have sold it. You know, I, I didn't personally have enough expertise to step in right away. I had learned a lot from her. Um, but I slowly started to realize, look, we're getting inquiries. I have a network of other consultants who do this type of work, and I can educate myself based on the experience I had working with my mother and based on her archive of applications and some of the documentation she had around the different types of permits and her history of working with these types of clients. And so I ended up digitizing tons of her files. Um, I kept the domain and did some SEO and marketing around it to ensure we continued to get inquiries and match people with the right consultant. And over
Mhm.
time, I started to realize that I had strong enough footing, a good enough foundation to help these people
Wow.
navigate this process. I mean, it's a process that um, is, talking about unclear processes. Like this is and bureaucracy. Like this is something where I began to realize that I knew more than I initially thought, and I had
Yeah.
some tricks up my sleeve to help people figure this out. But yeah, I mean, I guess what I would highlight from a kind of grief and inheritance perspective is that this was a consultancy, and this is the type of thing that is not a business you think of as something that can be inherited or acquired because it's one person self-employed. But if someone were looking at a business similar to this one, I would say that there's more to it than you might think. The email list, the network itself, the archive of files, and the knowledge, that is an asset. And
Mhm.
being clever about that was important to me. Um, it wasn't as if the only asset was this domain that we could sell or not. It was existing niche uh, and the expertise that my mother built, there was a way for that to live on, and there was a way to build upon it, that I realized after really thinking about the problem.
Yeah. So did you like obviously you weren't working in the business before she passed. So, where were you working before?
Yeah. So I had worked for my mother like over the summer, and
Okay.
done some work for her kind of in a part-time capacity. But before my mother passed away, I had a corporate job at Wiley, a publishing company. I
Cool.
transitioned to doing like product management, publishing like online courses and things like that. And that was a very, typical corporate gig. Um, and when I needed to care for my mother while she was in hospice care, I ended up quitting and just focusing on some freelance writing that I was doing and focusing on family. And as I took on the role of executor, I kind of naturally evolved into kind of a more of a freelancer's lifestyle. I would take on projects, I'd be writing, and I'd also be tending to my mother's estate. And I realized I liked that. And it's very similar to the life my mother lived as a consultant, as somebody who ran a business.
Yeah.
Um, and I realized, like, oh, okay, I actually am inheriting her personality as well, like, or her
Yeah.
niche. And so it was a slow realization that I realized actually this could be a fit for me to continue my mother's work and to live a more entrepreneurial life as someone self-employed.
Cool. So did you did you do you work on both now? So like freelance writing
Yes, I
um
do.
and the business.
I, I I'm
Cool.
I'm still a writer. Yeah, I do. I do a lot of freelance writing. But so I write I write comedy for current affairs. We do kind of I'll write copy for cartoons and things like that. The magazine,
Nice.
it doesn't run ads, so they like to run fake ads for things that are satirical, and that's
Yeah.
one of my clients I have the most fun with. But I also will write sponsored content and things like that.
Mhm.
But that's very much freelance. I'm hustling always for the next client, and it pairs well with consulting work where I'm more focused on building this business, thinking of new ways to serve applicants for liquor permits, and making life easier for them. And it's fun because every day is different. I kind of each day I'm planning my own kind of set of tasks and thinking
Yeah.
strategically about how I can grow each of these kind of businesses.
That's super cool. So I guess given the entire breadth of the experience, how did your outlook? I'm going to push you a little bit further on this topic because I think it's
Sure,
interesting.
sure.
How did your outlook on career change? And um, do you think the decision to kind of follow your mom's footsteps and not only take over her business but go the more entrepreneurial route, was it, based on cause effect, or what do you think it was just like a coincidence with where you were in your maturation and career?
I think that part of grieving is like, you're commemorating, remembering, you're thinking through uh, what I spent a lot of time thinking through what my mother's life meant and what kind of life she chose to live. And you know, she had experienced so many setbacks in life and disappointments. She tried things that didn't work.
Yeah.
And as I processed that, I just sort of came to the conclusion like that was a life I would like to live. I found that to
Hmm.
be when you finally see someone's life from that perspective, beginning to end. Well, I guess I only showed up when she was 30 or something. But I have having written her obituary and thinking about what her life meant and the story of her life, I started to realize like, hey, that's a life that I personally find exciting, fulfilling, and like um, something I would want to emulate. And so here it is a coincidence. Here has fallen into my lap some opportunities to do some consulting work or
Right.
um, step outside of my normal wheelhouse. Um, but it's compatible with my personality and kind of my goals. And I think that it was a deep there's a deep tie there between the emotional side and the career side.
Yeah.
Um, so it was a coincidence, but it was something that I felt fit.
I saw the link between the eulogy and the obituary and the comments that you made around that, and the way you describe, your own career as well. So there's definitely like maybe some of that reflection came out. I mean, obviously you're reflecting because um, your mom did die, and it did, you are mourning her loss and thinking about her every day, and understanding, with my dad, I wanted to live the life that he lived, which was similar to your mom, very adventurous, very entrepreneurial, very, I'm my own boss, and like I'm helping people and bringing people up along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I there were probably already moments throughout my 20s where I thought about emulating my mother, but it really forced the question
Yeah.
um, when when I was working on her estate and after her passing, and really reflecting on what I want out of life, and um, reflecting on the fact that I feel her life was really worth living and exciting. So, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, that's kind of what made me take this path.
Yeah. So for others who are in their 20s, having lost a parent and maybe received, whether it's a business inheritance or a financial inheritance, for you, you know, personal financial, did you receive any type of, you know, personal financial inheritance from your mom? And if so, did that have anything to do with like that type of career decision?
She had life insurance, and then the biggest thing was the house.
Hmm.
And so, yes, I mean, I realized, okay, this business needs investment in terms of marketing. And it's something where my mother might not have made this investment, or might not have thought of it as worthwhile, and because there's lots of different factors, right? At the time you're serving your clients, you're thinking, okay, maybe the play is to do this rather than that. But with new eyes, I was able, with giving it a fresh look, I was thinking, okay, I think actually this business can be augmented with a little investment here or there. And
Yeah.
yes, selling the house enabled me to do that.
Cool. And so what happened to your mom's house? Talk about the
Yes.
story of selling it.
Yeah, it took a while. I mean, it took like a year, and there were all these questions. I mean, lots of people were giving me advice about whether to sell it now or whether to wait, and the market is this or that. I had never sold a house before, and I didn't even really know how to uh, form an
Right.
opinion about the housing market. So I was sort of like, well, we sort of have to, in the sense that, um, you know, this house needs to be maintained. There needs to be these repairs. We have to pay the mortgage, and I think that the timing is right just because of what's going on in our family. And while there were not many houses on the market at the time, and we weren't sure if we were going to find somebody. But there are always people getting married, having children, expanding their family, and so we were able to find somebody who were excited by the location, and we had some trouble initially just because the deal had fallen through, just because of financing issues and things like that. I mean, this is something that was well outside of my own kind of knowledge base. So I was like, boy, I don't really know what to do. We were working with a realtor. But
Hmm.
ultimately, the deal was revived, and we were able to figure it out. And, you know, it went more smoothly than I thought it would,
Really?
given how challenging and complicated it was for me to just get my head around it. The hardest part really was packing up and looking at my childhood toys, textbooks from school, and like
Right.
photo
Trophies.
albums. Yes,
Yeah.
a photo album from my mother's first marriage, but even before my father. I mean, it's just
Wow.
things that, like, boy, like, this is something that I never got to speak to my mother about. But here we
Mm.
are, like, inheriting all of this stuff, and,
Yeah.
memorabilia, and just yeah, that part was just hard as an emotional experience. I've never experienced anything like it since, and yeah, it was a unique experience.
For sure. Going more off of that, there obviously are always things that we aren't able to talk about, or just don't talk about, don't have the conversations until we realize that it's too late. So were there any conversations or questions that you wish you had the opportunity to talk about with your mom about, money, about life, about memories?
I was fortunate to have a lot of time with my mother, even though she was declining. And in fact, in her case, the melanoma had spread to her brain. And so we were concerned about um, how that might affect her in hospice. But actually, we had a lot of really quality time, and she was able to share a lot about what she hoped for in the future for her children and for her grandchildren and things like that. And so I'm grateful to have had that time. Um,
Yeah.
I think the question of putting together a will and thinking about your wishes in terms of medically were things that we just never discussed as a family. And now I recognize that that's an important conversation to have,
Hmm.
especially if you have kids. And well, my mother was an incredibly optimistic person and would have never wanted to sit down and talk about these things. So it
Right.
is sort of something that I would recommend to people to think about as just sort of a part of life. It's like a conversation like any other. We're going to have a conversation about where you go to college. We're going to have a conversation about our finances, and we're going to have a conversation about end of life or medical questions about how you like to handle this or that type of situation. I think that
Hmm.
that's important, but it's not something that was common for us to talk about in our family, and we largely didn't.
Right.
So but that's how it goes.
Yeah. I like the way you phrased it too. It's like we're gonna have, it's just things families talk about, right? We're gonna learn the ABCs. We're gonna
Yeah.
read every night. We're gonna talk about traveling the world and all of our aspirations and career aspirations and support each other. And we're gonna talk about end of life planning. God forbid
Hmm.
one day it eventually does happen. Let's just have a plan and then, go live life and travel to all the places and read all the books and stuff like
And it's a surprise how people feel about this or that medical situation. I mean, you can't guess really, and it's important to know what
that.
your loved
Yeah.
ones would want in that
Is
situation.
there is there a reason, is there a story or a reason that that came up with you guys? Like, did having not spoken about it, did you know what type of funeral or what type of burial your mom wanted to have?
That subject we didn't really talk about, but my mother was very interested in pursuing aggressive treatment, even when the prognosis was very, very poor.
Hmm.
And she had a physician recommend that she look at hospice care, and she just was not emotionally ready for it. And you can't force someone to make this decision, even if,
Yeah.
as a family, you're like, we need these resources. We're trying to care for you, but this is somebody's life, and it's somebody's. It's their decision. And I remember that my mother at one point was like, let's go speak to one more physician. And I said, great, I want you to feel comfortable with this, and let's do it. And so we did. And we ended up speaking with a surgeon who uh, felt that there was a worthwhile surgery that she might be able to do. And it just turned out that the timing wasn't right. My mother declined too quickly to seek out this type of treatment. And we had an open dialogue about this type of thing while she was, coping with melanoma.
Yeah.
So, you know, we had I was able to respond to her in the moment and say, if this is what you want, I will drive you there. I will have the conversation with the doctor. I will take notes, and we will figure out what's best for you, and you can make the decision. We obviously were making the decision as a family, and there's a lot to consider. We want to spend as much time with you as we can,
Hmm.
um, but if you want to pursue this type of treatment, we want to respect that. And so, yes, there's things like that came up. Now, in our particular situation, um, my mother experienced a very steady decline until she passed away. And it wasn't as if there were um, a lot of uh, big surprises other than just a continued decline. So we didn't end up having to make those really challenging medical decisions that I know a lot of people do have to make.
Yeah.
But yes, it was a long dialogue, and it was something where I'm not sure what I myself would have done in that situation. I was trying to relate. What would I do if I were really facing the possibility that I might not survive this? Would I want to take that 1% chance? Would I want to spend time with my family and be comfortable in hospice care? I don't know. It's hard to answer.
Right.
And so I just was like ready to defer to her about what she thought was right for her.
Yeah, and from that comment, you can tell how hard it is for people to the eternal optimist that your mom and also my dad was, how hard it is to come to terms with, this is happening and I do need to make this decision.
I
And
don't even
so
know how you could fully come
yeah,
to accept something like that. It's very hard for me. Of course, we're both, young, so it's not.
right.
But maybe this is something that evolves over time as you
I
think
don't
about
think
your
at any
mortality.
age.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard to imagine. And my mother was in her early 60s, so it's something that she did not anticipate having to think
Yeah.
about.
How's but you mentioned, yeah, I guess my curiosity is how has this experience, around this entire experience of being an executor, of losing your mom, of watching her decline to melanoma, how has this experience changed your approach to life and planning?
I became a little bit of a hypochondriac, but but no, I
Fair.
mean, it gave me some anxiety on the health side. I mean, I do what anybody should do. I'm getting skin checks at the dermatologist on a regular basis, and that gives me peace of mind, and
Hmm.
that's that. But that's just health maintenance, and it doesn't need to be something I necessarily dwell on. But I haven't thought too much about. Um, my own mortality, other than just like, gee, sometimes it's a surprise, these medical ailments. I don't have kids of my own. I have a niece and nephew, and I've talked to my sister about these things more recently because um, when you have kids, that's really, really important to think about what their future will be, and what we can do for them by planning ahead, and thinking about
Hmm.
things that might be kind of morbid to think about, but is worthwhile. And having been a child of somebody going through this type of thing, I recognize that, like, you got to set them up for success, especially them. They're very, very young, and just important to think about. Even though you're young.
Right. It's so interesting because it's so much easier to think about it for other people, thinking about my grandma and my grandfather who are getting up there in age, and it's like, yeah, like we do need to put these end of life plans in place. But to think about it for myself is really challenging, and I can see why so many people avoid it. But yeah, it's obvious that to the outsider that your sister may need to think about that and have those conversations. But on the inside, it's really hard because she has two little ones.
Yes, and this experience taught us a lot. I mean, even just the
Yeah,
vocabulary of being able to talk about these things, and just recognizing, oh yeah, there are these types of decisions that need to be made. I mean, it wouldn't have occurred to us even.
for sure.
But yeah, I harbor a certain type of like delusional attitude towards the future, where like they're going to come up with some type of serum, and I'm going to live right into the 22nd century. So, I
Let's
mean,
do
I
it.
don't know. It's
I'm up for
not, but yeah, like I think it's hard to really think about seriously. It's something that's important to think about seriously, but it is just. I think that the most helpful thing is to think of it just as part of life, and it is one of these things that uh, we should discuss. It really is taboo, I think, especially in America.
Yeah,
And just breaking down that taboo might be a big part of what needs to be done in just terms of being able to have this type of dialogue with your family.
definitely. And that's why we're here on the podcast today, talking about it, making it a little bit less taboo, and hopefully sharing some
Yes,
laughs along the way and good advice too. Speaking of
hopefully.
laughs, though, speaking of laughs, I know. So you inherited a house, you inherited a business, but you also inherited a dress shop, or what was left of it. So
Oh
talk
yes.
to us, talk to us about what happened to the dress shop?
Yeah, my mother ended up leaving behind that chapter of her career, but retained a huge inventory of just bridesmaids dresses, prom dresses, wedding dresses, things like that. And we definitely sold furniture and things like that. But I was like, what are we going to do with all these dresses? I have no idea. I had a lot of trouble finding a consignment shop that would take them. Um, the dress shop was operational in like the early 2010s. I was hoping that maybe they would become, the style would come back around or something like that. But I ended up hanging on to them for the longest time. And actually, I still have like a dozen or more of these things in my closet. And One birthday party that I threw actually last year, had a bunch of friends over, and I was like, I have all these dresses. So my female friends were like, let's try them on. And we had a great time just having drinks. I tried one on too. And so it just was fun to just kind of like have fun with this thing that I inherited, and kind of have a goofy mock like bridal party or something.
I love that.
Yeah, no, it's like a gift that I got from my mother in a weird way, something that I would never have asked her for. But it's fun to kind of celebrate, this era of her life in a funny way. So yeah, I still don't know what I'm going to do with them. I mean, I guess I'll just hang on to them.
Right. I feel like every time you look at them now, you probably laugh about the story from last year's birthday and all your
Yeah,
friends, trying them on, including yourself.
it grief is there is a way in which you maintain a relationship with somebody that you've lost.
Yeah.
Some people, if you're religious, it's through prayer. Others, it's through commemorating them in this or that way. And it's just funny to me that I can remember helping my mother with the dress shop when I was in college, and now I have like a new memory of that she sort of gifted me, by hanging on to these dresses, living her life in an adventurous way, and then having the spontaneous idea to like have a party where we try them on. So it was just kind
Yeah,
of it's great. It's something that I'm really grateful for in a funny way, that my mother lived a life where these types of things were part of it.
definitely. Michael, as we wrap up here, I just wanted to give you the opportunity in case there wasn't a story that we talked about. Are there any lessons or stories that you want to leave for our audience?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, anybody who goes through something like this, I would just say be gentle with yourself. It's so unpredictable how uh, grief manifests. I can remember picking up a friend at the hospital for some routine procedure and just having a very hard time just being there and
Wow.
not realizing that and thinking, oh, okay, um, thinking I'd be more capable of handling something that like that than maybe I was. And I think it's important to be gentle with yourself as you go through these things. And I made tons of mistakes with the estate, but I also, am grateful for those lessons and things like that. I mean, it's okay to make a mistake, I think, and to just handle it in the best way you know how. And then the last thing is just having people around you. We talked about this, but it's just invaluable to be able to reach out to somebody when you're dealing with something like this.
Yeah.
So yes, hopefully some of my experience is helpful to other people, because I know it can be just a roller coaster.
Yeah. And you can repeat yourself on this next question, but that was really valuable advice. Michael, I want you to imagine that, you know, a 30-year-old gets the call or that their mom just got diagnosed with melanoma, and they're about to embark on the same exact path that you have been embarking on for the past, couple of years. What grief mantras or words of wisdom would you want to tell that person?
Hmm. I think that one thing that I would say to somebody who's going through something like that is that you don't need to have it all figured out right away. And I think that getting a good understanding of what you don't know about the future is important. And it's unlike anything I've experienced, it's probably the most significant thing to happen to me and the most emotionally fraught thing that I've experienced. And so it's just something where, yes, again, it's important to be gentle with yourself as you go through this. And the thing with cancer is it's also just unclear what's going to happen. Some people recover and some people don't, and it's a challenging thing. I can remember recording conversations with our doctors just because it was so hard to manage the deluge of information that you're getting.
Yeah.
And to help someone navigate that when they themselves are going through the question of what's going to happen, what's going to happen when I'm gone, people I care about, and what's going to happen next in this medical journey. That's a lot to be dealing with, in addition to juggling the medical decision making and all this different vocabulary and stuff like that, and navigating bureaucracy both in a hospital and outside of a hospital. So
Right.
I think that taking it day by day and piece by piece is important. But yeah, I guess that's what I would say.
I love that. And what was your mom's name?
My mom's name was Marilyn.
Marilyn.
Abazia Lodato. Yeah, she was Italian. Actually, I'm thinking of changing my middle name to Abazia as kind of a way of commemorating her. I just love it, Abazia. And I would have the same initials that she had too, MAL.
That would be super cool. So in addition to changing your name it's Abazia?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. In addition to changing your name, how else do you honor Marilyn's legacy?
Well, one thing I did, which I'm really excited that I did, was I sponsored a bench in Prospect Park here in Brooklyn. And it's a place I can go and sit and reflect on her birthday or other special days. It's a great place to watch birds. I picked a good spot, like secluded in the trees. Prospect Park has kind of some heavily wooded areas, which I really like. Living in the city, it's nice to just be around some greenery and some nature. And I ended up posting a fundraiser online on my Instagram about the bench, and many of my friends contributed, which I'm so grateful for, because having a place to go is really important to me. I don't live in my hometown. I don't live close enough to my mother's resting place. So having somewhere where I can literally walk there was important to me. And cool. Other than carrying on her legacy through her businesses and just kind of embodying her personality, that bench has been really important to me.
Wow, that's really special. Thank you for sharing that. Michael, how else can people find you if they want to reach out?
Sure. You can check out my business at liquorpermit.com should you be opening a bar or restaurant. My personal website is michaellodato.com, where I link to all of my writing and things like that. And I'm at Magnesium Mike on Instagram. And I encourage people to reach out. I have met people over the past year or so who have encountered this type of big life change. And it's always it's always exciting to be able to contribute, to give advice, or to just be an ear for somebody who's going through something like this.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that. And I appreciate, you joining me today on the currency of grief and providing that advice to all of our listeners. It's really profound advice, and your story and experience is going to help a lot of people. So thank you for that.
I so appreciate the opportunity. I think what you're doing is so important. And yes, everybody's got a different story, and there are so many facets to this experience. So yes, thanks for what you do, and thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks so much, Michael, and podcast listeners, podcast family. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of The Currency of Grief. Don't forget, it's a great day to have a great day. So go have a great day. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Currency of Grief podcast. My hope is that today's conversation brought you clarity, comfort, and even a spark to start those difficult but necessary conversations in your own life. If you found this episode helpful, it would mean the world to me if you would share it with one other person who you feel this podcast could impact. And please, take a moment to leave us a 5-star review. Your review will help us reach more people who need this resource. Remember, the best time to talk about death and money was yesterday. The second best time is now. Until next time, I'm Justin Weidenfeld, your Grief Financial Officer, and this has been the Currency of Grief podcast.